Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a world's finest team-up between Michael K Vaughan and myself, where we talk about comic books every Wednesday. And I horned my way into this whole event years ago, so it's Mike who gets to pick what we talk about. Which means that from time to time we are going to run the risk of talking about a loser. Because he loves the loser comics. He loves giant apes, giant monsters, and loser superheroes. And boy, oh boy, did he pick a Lulu of a loser today. He picked Aquaman, who for decades has been a recognized punchline in the superhero lineup. I have the comic, a reprint of the comic in which he first appeared. More Fun Comics from 1941. Where a writer and editor at the time, Mort Weisinger, used to come up with 10 cheesy ideas before breakfast and hurl them all into anthology comics like this. These were big. Never mind that $5.99 price tag. That would have caused people in 1941 to literally faint on the sidewalk. That was practically your rent for the month. But what you would do in an anthology comic is just throw a whole bunch of ideas at your readers in 8-page features. And they would let you know which ones they really liked. And as you can tell, that will mean that a whole bunch of those features will be really lame. Really, really lame. And in this issue where Aquaman appears for the first time, he is easily the lamest one. The lamest thing in here. And one of the things in here is just some random cowboy. But let's get to Aquaman. There we have an in-house ad for Superman on the big screen, and some of you will be saying, "Wait, 1941? That's way too early for the Christopher Reeve movie." You're right. You're right. We have the Spectre, who has godlike powers, except when he doesn't. Okay, then we get to Aquaman, and there is Aquaman, and in this little 8-page feature, we get his origin story. His father was a famous oceanographer, an ocean explorer, and he is exploring ruins down at the bottom of the ocean. He apparently is all by himself, and he is, for some mysterious reason, wearing a bikini. He isn't in a wetsuit of any kind. And when he discovers these ancient ruins, he realizes that he can make one of the rooms waterproof and live there, like SpongeBob. So he does. And he uses the super science of that lost civilization to experiment on his son, a tried and true tradition in comic books, and give his son the ability to breathe underwater. And thus is born Aquaman. Aquaman says his mother is not in the picture anymore, and his father dies soon after. Notice in this first version of his origin story, there's no talk about him being the king of Atlantis. There's no talk about his mother being a member of another species from Atlantis. He's just a kid whose father experimented on him. And we're told that drawing oxygen from the water and using all the power of the sea to make me wonderfully strong and swift, by training in 100 scientific secrets, I became what you see, a human being who lives and thrives under the water. And his father says, "My son is a true dweller of the deep. His name shall be Aquaman." Because that's just what you want your father to do, right? That's what your father, when he sees that you have an aptitude for lying to people, says, "My son's name shall be Lawyer." Anyway, Aquaman tells this story to some random-ass Joe and then jumps back into the water. But you'll find that he isn't true. What he said about himself is not true. He doesn't know any scientific secrets, and he is not wonderfully strong. This original version of Aquaman was just Batman underwater. No superpowers at all, except the ability to breathe underwater. And I guess see underwater and live underwater, but nobody thought about that at the time. Nobody thought what you'd need in order for that to be. I mean, obviously, Aquaman's father is scuba diving in a bikini. So obviously no one thought about the crushing pressures of the depths. So this Aquaman just has adventures. He punches people, they punch him back, they knock him unconscious, they throw him in the ocean for some reason. He doesn't have any super strength, he doesn't have any super speed. In these first appearances, he doesn't seem all that limited about how long he can spend on land, But later writers thought that would be a good idea if he were extremely limited in how much time he could spend on land. At one point, for a long time, that was an hour. If he was out of water for an hour, or even, as one famous cover has it, 2 minutes, then he starts to die. That's the kind of superhero we're dealing with. In this first appearance of Aquaman, he is friends with the creatures of the deep. He doesn't command them. He can't override their own will, but he's friends with a lot of them. I guess he's met a lot of them, because, there are only about 30 of them. And so he can ask favors of them, or has trained them to do certain things to rescue him from the peril that he finds himself in every single 8-page backup story. I've read all of those 8-page adventures of Aquaman, and he is the biggest loser in the superhero world. He, at one point, as I mentioned to Mike, at one point he's defeated by Bubbles. Not a villain named Bubbles, just Bubbles. And Mort Weisinger and his crew of writers, they came up with standard dumb adventures to fill those 8 pages. What if Aquaman were afraid of the water? What if Aquaman forgot how to swim? What if Aquaman's head got really big? Stuff like that. It's all dumb. He has no personality. He never actually effectuates any solution. He just stumbles across it. And he was one of many, many, many such costumed adventurers that were thrown at the wall at the time. The reason Aquaman was dreamt up and thrown at the wall is because a few years earlier, a competing comic book company had come up with a character called the Submariner. And the Submariner was a whole lot interesting. In fact, he was so interesting that comic book fans loved him. They couldn't get enough of him. He was weird looking. He had pointed ears. He had wings on his ankles. He was definitely a member of an undersea race. It wasn't that we didn't see it. We did see it. And he was also decidedly ambiguous towards humans. Aquaman just decides he's going to be a true blue hero. The Submariner, right from his first appearance, with artwork by the great Bill Everett, is decidedly ambivalent about human beings. The very first thing we see the Submariner do in his first appearance in a comic book is swim up to 2 divers in diving helmets and crush their heads inside their helmets. He doesn't know if they're Nazis. He doesn't care. He doesn't know anything. He knows they're surface people. So he just kills them. Now, he gets a little bit domesticated as time goes on. He starts to direct his anger at the Nazis. But still, he is not a friend of the surface world. Not an unconditional friend at all. And when he is brought back, when Stan Lee brings him back in the new age of Marvel Comics, he is often the enemy of mankind. He invades Manhattan on several occasions. In other words, Prince Namor is far more interesting as a character. It doesn't matter that the gimmick that he swims around underwater. He's more interesting as a character, whereas Aquaman has no character at all. He's just this guy who swims around underwater. He's not stronger than you are. He has no alien viewpoint on anything. He's just a guy who swims around underwater. So, like many of the heroes that were thrown against the wall just like that, you'd expect that he would fade away, that he would just fade into obscurity. And he mostly did. He mostly did. Someone remembered him to make him a founding member of the Justice League years later. Why, I don't know. He was still limited how much time he could spend on land. He was still only effective in the water, and then only what? A little. What's the point of having Aquaman on the team and saying, well, we have him on the team so that we have someone who can handle themselves underwater, when the Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, and Superman can all handle themselves underwater just as well, or better. So what's the point? There wasn't any point. But we included Aquaman in the original Justice League, and I paid no attention to it at all. Of course, I didn't read the original Justice League because that was several decades before I was born. But I heard stories that Aquaman had a few occasional contributions to the team. I didn't really think anything of him at all. And then something miraculous happened. Then a miracle happened. And I was enthralled, and Aquaman was a part of it. I don't know why. Again, I don't know why. And that thing was called Super Friends. A Saturday morning cartoon called Super Friends, which had a very little roster. It was not actually the Justice League. It was Superman, Wonder Woman. The announcer for the show had obviously never read a comic book in his life and was pronouncing Batman's name like he was a dentist from Scarsdale, so he called him Batman. Mr. Batman. Is Dr. Batman in. And Robin. The writer of Super Friends did not break up the team of Batman and Robin contributes to Adventures. And Aquaman. I don't know that any of you are old enough to remember Super Friends. Da, 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 da. There was an opening montage that introduced all of these characters, and Aquaman's opening montage was the best of them all. Showed him riding a giant seahorse and telepathically commanding an armada of undersea creatures. Not just fish. The original writers of Aquaman had a real problem with the fact that whales aren't fish. I don't think any of them really believed it. But Aquaman would occasionally help out on Super Friends. He would command the fish to help out. So he had a moment there, and that was nice. But I then immediately forgot about him again. Once Super Friends started transforming into all sorts of sirens. There we go. I would say they're coming to arrest my guest, but they've had plenty of opportunities and they haven't done it, so they must be upping their standards. But anyway, Aquaman then vanished again, and I thought nothing of it, until Aquaman resurfaced in pop culture again as a joke, only this time knowingly a joke. There used to be a TV show called Entourage. It had some pretty good stuff in it, and at its heart was a raging a-hole up-and-coming actor named Vince, who was always, he had an entourage of friends who were just leeches on him, and he was always looking for his big breakout role. And in the show, that big breakout role was touted as Aquaman the movie. And the reason it was because the whole show was an ironic send-up of the entertainment industry. That was supposed to be a funny idea. We even see storyboards of what Aquaman is going to look like, and he originally has this kind of bell-bottom disco outfit. It was supposed to be a ridiculous project. It was supposed to be a ridiculous idea. But then, Hollywood loves ridiculous ideas, so they actually made an Aquaman movie starring Jason Momoa, and it made $1 billion. And in order to do that, in order to make an Aquaman movie, in order to have him in Smallville, the actor who now plays Reacher on TV played Aquaman on Smallville. In order to do all of that, you obviously can't have him be just a guy who swims underwater. You've got to beef up his power set, as the kids say. And they did. So Jason Momoa's Aquaman is super strong. We don't know exactly how strong, and we should. This is the Joss Whedon disease creeping its way into movies, into superhero movies, where if you're a superhero, you're just sort of generically powerful, and no one's more powerful than anyone else, unless it's Superman. That isn't true. Okay, that shouldn't be true. In the Justice League movies, I don't know how many of you have put yourself through them, but in the Justice League movies, there's no clear indication that Wonder Woman is thousands of times stronger than Aquaman, and she is, and should be. But there's no clear indication of that at all. But anyway, Aquaman can waterbend. He's super strong. He's really resilient. And I have no major problem with that, except that it's obvious catch-up. It's obviously still playing catch-up to Prince Namor the Submariner, the more interesting version of this character, who's been super strong from the beginning, who's been bulletproof from the beginning. Prince Namor does not command undersea life. He drafts them like horses. He doesn't ask them for favors or anything like that to get him out of jams. Prince Namor is one of the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe. Whereas in DC, Aquaman currently has a comic that's ongoing from DC, and in that comic, they have once again given him a new power set in an attempt to make him more interesting, I guess. The interesting thing, the only time that Aquaman has ever been interesting in the comic books was in the 70s. Now, again, I hear this from rumor. I'm far, far too young to remember. But in the 70s, I forget which writer it is. Mike would probably know. Some writer at DC Comics obviously went to somebody's office, whether it was whoever the editor was. Somebody went to Carmine Infantino's office and said, look, this character is recognized as a punchline. He's a loser. No one is seriously interested in this character. Can I do a few interesting things with him? Can I step out of the superhero norm with this character just a bit? And was obviously told yes. because Aquaman not only marries and has a son, but loses his son as a baby. Unthinkable things happen in a superhero comic book, and briefly, tragedy made Aquaman interesting, just a little, around the edges. But I don't even know if that's continuity anymore. I'm pretty sure that it can't be continuity in DC to have a heterosexual character. So either Aquaman and his boyfriend bought a baby from Thailand the way, Dave Rubin did, or he doesn't have a son anymore and never did. It's just been retconned out. That'd be a terrible shame for the little baby to be retconned out of existence after having been killed. But I haven't followed. I don't follow comics at the moment. Although it's just possible that a trip to the comic shop is on the cards for today. But I don't know if they've done that, if they've cleaned up or messied up Aquaman's story, but it doesn't matter. Because, as an old friend of mine used to say, you can't polish a turd. This is just a loser character, of the type that we all affectionately have come to expect Michael K. Vaughan to champion. He actually told me, well, it's this or Rom. So I took the lesser of two evils, but that's basically the story of Aquaman. DC's lovable loser. He wears gold chainmail. He commands the fishes of the ocean, and when he sends out a command to the fishes of the ocean, killer whales and whales show up. Dolphins show up. They're not fish. They show up anyway. And they help him out in his wacky adventures, especially in the 1940s, which were, I've just finished reading all of them, and they are ridiculous. It's ridiculous how hokey they are and how useless this character is. When he turns the bad guys, in those old 8-page stories, when he turns the bad guy over to the cops on the wharf, 9 times out of 10 in that story, the cops could have caught the bad guy faster, even though they can't breathe underwater, if he hadn't been in the way. But he has a neat name. We'll give him that. He has a neat name. So that's your Epic Comic Book Wednesday for this week. God only knows what we'll do next week. I will put some tentative suggestions, but it's Mike's call. So you Aquaman fans out there, 1,000 apologies. Maybe up your game a little. But I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you next time. Thank you, BookTube.